This is pretty much standard issue in most office environments today. But this and this, not quite. In fact, most companies in Asia don't have policies in place to govern bring your own device or BYOD adoption. According to a recent survey conducted by VMware, 60% of respondents in Asia Pacific would try and make it work on their own if there was no IT support for personal devices in your office. Another 63% would Google for an answer. So, like it or not, employees are going to use their personal mobile devices to work and access corporate networks. So what does that all mean for companies in Asia in terms of security? ZDNet Asia gathered several market players in a roundtable discussion and asked if companies in Asia were doing enough to support BYOD and enterprise mobility.
If you're looking at enterprise level, I think there was this hesitation. I think really they are very concerned about security because one thing about mobile devices, as we know, is that it is in the hand of the individuals. We have heard about lawsuits where people actually wanted to claim back whatever that's in the individual personal device, and they have to go even to the court to demand for it. And we are such a competitive landscape right now. So I think those are probably the reason why enterprises are like a bit behind the curve, in embracing it. And the other issue is about the cost, the budget. Okay, there was a lot of concern about what exactly the budget that we set aside to promote mobilities. Because the expectation is more than just fun apps. It's about whether did it really derive productivity gain. So even that question itself is sometimes not answered properly. So there are these questions that is holding the enterprise from actually jumping very eagerly into the mobility space. I think that's a key thing that is, So if you ask me, I think the enterprise generally speaking behind the curve.
Mobility, right, happens in our organization is either accidental or the organization planned for it. Now, when an organization planned for it, they probably, I would say maybe half of them will start looking at sustainability. That's where the support comes in. That's where the security comes in. That's where everything might come in. Now, a lot of organizations in Singapore is accidental. It is because of the voice of the employees. Surprisingly, based on my experience, it is the senior management that first wants to bring, all these devices for the convenience because they travel. It's convenient. Now, a lot of organizations, especially within the IT departments, did not know how to deal with it. They often would then support for a limited number of users. Sometimes they pilot. But, the strategy, the afterthought, the support, the sustainability program, and more importantly, the security is an afterthought. It's not something they actually plan for.
There's alarm bells ringing all over the place. And one of the reasons is that probably all of the estimates that we've heard so far around the take-up of BYOD, in our experience, are all incorrect. They're all way under what the reality is. We haven't seen an organisation yet that doesn't have BYOD somewhere in the organisation. It's just a matter of finding it, right? And it will be at the executive level typically. So there's a very reactive approach to mobility at the moment. Organisations are looking at it and saying, how do we secure these devices? And a mobile device management approach has been the kind of classic approach to solving the challenge, but it is a very tactical approach. They're not really thinking about what mobility may lead to ultimately. So at the moment, it's still very much around access to email, but increasingly and very rapidly, we're seeing mobility now extend into other enterprise applications. And we're starting to see organisations realising that the devices can do some pretty smart things that traditional technology couldn't do. And we're now starting to see that blurring of the lines between just enabling internal employees to connecting customers, partners, suppliers, even regulators to the core back-end system.
With the increase of new platforms that we're seeing on the mobile landscape itself, we also see that the policies is essentially very, very crucial. And I think this not just in terms of the security and of course the network, etc. But security is always an afterthought. Many times people think that it's a responsibility of the IT department. Whereas, of course, historically for BB, it is really the IT department, right? But then with the emergence of BYOD, it definitely would involve functions like legal, even HR, because then we're talking about privacy earlier, we're talking about compliance, etc.
What are the 5 top I guess leaks or where it's a danger point that companies are still not really looking to address with the movement towards enterprise mobility, personal devices. Where do you see the 5 big holes?
The biggest holes are obviously the data replication. Data is now copied everywhere. We on this table probably have 4 or 5 instances of the same mailbox across the different platforms, right? We used to have one managed device from the corporation and there was the email. Now it's all over the place. We bring in our own applications. Bring your own device means bring your own application. It means backup software, note-taking software. The data goes everywhere and there's no proper SLA in place. And then obviously the unmanaged devices taking into the infrastructure. We used to come from that well-maintained, closed-down PC, and now we have that 5, 6, 7 variations of that mobile device. What is it doing actually in the infrastructure? And how does the IT security officer, does he cope, and how does he provide the compliance, the control that he's required to have in place?
We conducted a survey with our enterprise customer in APAC, and we found out that 1 in 2 employees who know that Dropbox is banned would still use it. 50% of the employees, they know it's banned, they would use it. Why? Because it's simple. Our enterprise customers are trying to figure out how to create a BYOD policy that allows consumer or their employees to move from the consumer utilities back to BYOD. CIOs are concerned, how do they keep data safe when there's a human error? What happens if I forgot my laptop, somebody steals my iPad from Starbucks? What happens then? Whom does he call? It comes back to support. Whom does he call up? How much time do we have? Can we remote erase it? The other complications attached to it is if I do a remote wipe, the data is owned, the device is owned by the employee. Who owns that data? There is gray area there. If IT does a remote wipe and everything gets wiped off, will employee accept it? Selective wipe is a lot more difficult thing to do than done. I mean, those are the things that worries CIO when it comes to data security. And fortunately, unfortunately, these are not the things that technology can fix. It's a combination of technology, processes, and people.
Right now there's been a lot of I would say speculation and maybe talk about it, how the device unprotected is really the hole that will bring the hackers straight into the corporate network. Is that what you're seeing right now? Is the device really the weakest link right now?
First of all, we must agree that a mobile device, whether it's a handphone, a tablet, is a computer. So as soon as the mobile device is attached to the corporate network, it becomes an access point for cyber criminals who are skillful enough to gain access to various parts of the enterprise network. So from that perspective, this device is basically a door to the enterprise network. Now, when it comes to malware, as far as we know, there isn't, or at least we have not seen a malware that cause huge destruction to enterprise network that runs on a mobile device like say Android or Apple iOS. But that doesn't mean there isn't one out there. Recently or recent years, in fact recent months, the term APT is very popular, Advanced Persistent Threat, and nobody knows whether there's something out there that is lurking somewhere in somebody's network, somewhere around the world. And how does that malware get onto the enterprise network? Well, it could be really from a mobile device. Or if we broaden the definition of a mobile device, could we say that a USB thumb drive is a mobile device? I think that definition is yes. So, and from that perspective, yes, the malware did get into the corporate network from a USB thumb drive.
Where is the data? What is it really that the hackers or cyber criminals are after? That's the data. Yeah. That's in the network, that's on the PCs. In we're not very familiar in the way they use mobile devices to get access to that network, right? I mean, if you look at Android, and you are the one who could give more detail on how many viruses and malware is out there on mobile devices, it is plenty. But how is it used, right? There are APTs, there are targeted attacks on mobile devices. That information is used to gain access to the network, not so much to the mobile device, because the data and all the sensitive information is in the network and in the data center.
I mean, there's three players out there. We haven't really spoken about Windows Mobile or Windows 8, 8.1 at this point. Look, it's still, you know, in at least the 11-inch space, and we're talking the iPad space, you know, it's still got about 10 to 13% market share in that space, right? So it's coming, it's growing. And I think, you know, from the customers and the partners that we have discussions with regularly, is typically customers and partners are comfortable with Microsoft because when the threat is understood, it is patched, right? We can all whinge about, you know, every third Tuesday of the month or whatever it is, it's Microsoft Patch Day. But that's actually a cadence, right? And that's actually come from years of expectancy theory, if you like, of what to expect. Android, that doesn't exist. It's open, and it's open because anyone can actually edit the kernel of the operating system. That's a threat, big threat, right? And customers and partners don't know how to solve for that. Anyone can make changes. iOS, not as quite as vulnerable. However, Apple have been pinned quite badly of late because they're very slow to patch their threats. So I think, you know, from an enterprise point of view, and you know, I deal a lot with enterprise customers and partners who support enterprise customers. It's really the devil you know, right? I know Microsoft. I know they will have vulnerabilities, and I'll know from an endpoint perspective they'll be patched in due course. I don't know about Apple. I don't know about Android. And I think that this is part of the consideration from an endpoint view at least.
With BYOD, the emergence of cloud services, and increasing complexity in security attacks, it is proving challenging for companies to ensure their IT infrastructure is sufficiently protected. We asked the roundtable participants to highlight some key policies Asian companies should have in their enterprise mobility strategy.
From a security standpoint, of course, we still believe that the network security is still going to be the key, because like what we said a couple of times in the conversation is the fact that the data resides within the network. So regardless of today, whether we're talking about iPhones, tablets, laptops, USB thumb drives, etc., we must make sure and be very vigilant when it comes to network security. And you know, even though network security has been around as long as what network has been, the reality is that, you know, 95% of the networks today are still compromised. I think it's also because of the fact that the defenses that we have today basically fall short when it comes to the new attacks that we are seeing. So, you know, hackers have become a lot more sophisticated, but not our precaution or our protection.
Well, there's one phrase that kind of sums up the view of security and how people should respond to it, and that is it's not the strongest fortress that survives, it's the one that can respond most quickly to changing threats. And so the emphasis needs to move not away from locking things down, but a greater emphasis on surveillance and the ability to respond very quickly to those changing threats. I think the two keys is, you know, it is about zero trust networks, zero trust devices, and thinking much more about activity rather than borders and gateways and firewall controls.
I would really encourage organizations at this juncture to look into data security. I think there are a lot of emphasis on network application. These are necessary. But because IT through mobility is becoming porous, a lot of data is actually creeping out from the enterprise. And if you think about it, at the mobile devices, we're not dealing with a lot of data. It's not about the volume, but it's the value of this data. Through our email communication, some things we deal with are very important. The chat messages that you have with colleagues sometimes are also very important to our organization. Now, our organization must learn to deal with this porous infrastructure and how data are actually leaving the organization and how to keep them secure.
It comes down to the human. So I would think constant and consistent security awareness education in an enterprise is very important. I have known companies who conduct just once a year for the entire company who has 1,000 employees, that will not work. So I think focused, consistent, and really valuable security awareness program within an enterprise. The company could work with an outside vendor or consultants like the Big Fours, or some vendors who were able to provide that valuable education. I think this is very positive because at the end of the day, it is the humans who gives up the, who link the data for the matter.
If someone could come up with a killer device that everybody wanted to use and everybody wanted to bring into the work mode, that would, when you brought it into the environment, you dock it, and then when you docked it, it would get rid of the original operating system and just boot up to a separate operating system that was fine, on the corporate network. Hey, this doesn't exist, right?
It does, but no one wants to use it. That's
right, and it would define. I mean, ultimately, it won't matter, right? We understand the networks are porous. We understand that nowhere is perfect. We understand that the strongest fortress often doesn't survive. Remember the Alamo. We have to respond real fast, and IT really need to kind of understand how to deliver that.
Yep.
What information is available, and to who, and what is restricted, and to who.
Yep.
I think if we can base on that and actually tell people why that's restricted to them, I think that helps in the constant education.
I feel that we are like, in a fitness center where you're jumping on the tractor and the tractor just keep on going. And as you although it's the same speed, at some point in time your heartbeat will start to accelerate, and you just have to stay on with it. So I think the challenge about this whole thing is about, how do you actually look after the human factors ultimately? I still think that the only safeguard is really about human factors. The awareness and the knowledge. I think the other thing about this so-called tractor concept is that not to be over obsessed, because if you are too careful and too particular about security, my point is there's no point coming out with a solution, a function that is so tightly, so your hands are all tied that in the end, it is not useful at all. Then I think by all means don't even do it in the first place. So I think a banker told me many years ago that like a banking industry is about risk management. It's not about helping you to manage your money. So I think likewise in mobility, at the end of the day, your policy must be really about what is really you are out to get, to achieve. And at the end of the day, it's about risk management, and risk changes constantly. So you just have to go on with it. Yeah.
One of the key things that employees are looking for, the reason why they like mobile devices, tablets, is to portability. It's easy to carry, but most importantly, applications, apps that have changed the life. I think as an organization, if you're part of one, I think we need to give them a safer alternatives. We just can't make a policy and say, you cannot use this app, period. Well, they'll find a way to use that. That's how the life is. We need to tell them, if you like this app and it's helping you perform your work better, that app is not safe. We would give you an app that's safer. We need to give them a safer alternative to employees. And if we don't do that as part of a policy, I think that it's a matter of time we would fail. Data is going to sit outside the data center, somewhere in the cloud, and nobody likes it. And the loss of control of data is something that's a big threat, and I think we can solve it by giving them a safer alternative.
So come up with your own Dropbox or your own...
Absolutely.
The one pointer which I would give to organizations and enterprises is to establish a strategy, an enterprise mobility strategy, which should be deployed on boardroom level. It should comprise of the benefits, business process optimization, employee productivity, getting the right talent into the organization. It should have a strategy on the whole ecosystem, that is devices, that is network connectivity, that is the security policy, the overall HR legal policies, right? And that should also include, for example, the support models. If a hospital is going to use iPads for their doctors and to sit down with the patients and discuss the surgery upcoming, then there needs to be an SLA in place. If the device breaks down, there's a replacement within 3 hours. So support is part of it. How to procure, how to source a new iPad on the other side of the world. It must be enterprise grade. So the strategy, the benefits, how it's going to be executed, that should be nailed down. And don't start boiling the ocean. Start small business units, small processes. You can't eat it all in once, but you need to have that holistic approach and strategy.